Hello everyone, it's Austin here at Bates Nursery. We're here again with our Bates Botanical Bootcamp, and today we are demystifying fertilizer labels. So not going to be a huge topic today. It's fairly simple actually. The first thing we need to start with is our fertilizers, and that is what we're going to use or what we want to achieve. So when first choosing a fertilizer, I think you need to choose which route you want to go. If you want to go with the organics, which is these over here I brought you, you're probably familiar with the tones, the holly tone, plant tone, tomato tone here. Those are organic fertilizers, so they're derived mainly from manure from animals, poultry litter, mainly just animal-based products. These are nice because they're in multiple size bags. This is the smallest bag we sell, and they go bigger than this. They're easy to apply, and it's really hard to burn your plants. I'll talk about that in a little while, but you can almost not overdo it with this fertilizer. It's just an organic, so you can add it in on top. You top dress on top of the soil, let it leach down in close to your plants, and it adds for long-lasting. It's a long-lasting benefit for your plants. It's got other mycorrhizas in it, which are like very small, kind of fungi type things that are going to help out as well, and it sticks around a long time in the soil. You can add this multiple times during the growing season. Like I said, it's preferred for most people because it is organic. If we're growing veggies in a raised bed or whatever, it's nice to just be organic and use this. Now, do know, I'm going to talk about some other stuff later, but that's the first thing is we need to pick which one we want to go, organic or synthetic. These are the synthetics that I brought in today. This is Miracle-Gro. You're all probably familiar with these little boxes. They are mixed with water when you apply these. It's a tablespoon per gallon. And it's a lot more stout. That's kind of the thing you're going to notice as we talk today is the differences between synthetics versus organics is you get a lot more juice, if you will, whenever you use the synthetic products because they can get those percentages higher. I'm going to talk about that in just a minute. This is I brought this in because this is kind of our most generic, I guess, fertilizer that most people think of. A 10-10 formula is what that is. And like I said, I'll talk about that in just a minute. But that's kind of the baseline. That's kind of what most of the people will think of. They'll come in and say, hey, I need some 10-10. This is what they're talking about. So yeah, let's get into that because I wanted to let y'all know that all of these products, it doesn't really matter too much on what it says on the label. It does a little bit, but this is mainly just marketing right here. What you need to know is the numbers. So let me pull this. This is just plant tone. Let's put this one down first. So there's 3 main nutrients that plants need for successful growth. I'm going to put this over here. You got that, Tyler? Yep. See that? Okay, this is called the guaranteed analysis. So y'all can see that. And those 3 numbers up top stand for NPK. That's what we call the NPK levels. And that stands for nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, the 3 biggest plant nutrients that are needed for healthy growth. So the first number, which is nitrogen, which is the one that is most actively used, that keeps your plants green. It provides lush green growth, and that's the big one that you need. So that, like I said, that's going to provide your leafy growth. That's what's going to keep this thing going, and that's the nutrient that a plant is needed the most. The middle number is your phosphorus. This is mainly for root development and flowers and fruit. So that's another one. That's the second biggest one that you need because you got to have that at fairly good levels so you get good quality fruit and flowering, and also helps with root expansion. The third number is your potassium. And potassium mainly is just a general nutrient that is needed to keep all things working correctly within the plant. It makes enzymes happen. It makes, it just keeps general vigor of the plant. It doesn't have a very specific thing that it does like nitrogen and phosphorus, but it just keeps things going. It keeps things happy and healthy. So we need all 3 of those. Now, do know there are more macronutrients that are needed within fertilizers, and there's also micronutrients that are added in some fertilizers, and they are all needed. All of those are needed for a plant. They're just not needed at the higher levels. That's why we talk about the NPK levels. So with plant tone, what we have here is a 5-3-3, and that's the percentage of nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. So this one is a 5% nitrogen, and this is kind of what I wanted to show you with let's say here. We've got with the organics. Is the thing is that there's not too much difference. This here is Hollytone. We use this for more acid-loving plants. It's got, let's see, it's got sulfur in it, which will help lower pH a little bit. That's the biggest difference with this product and this one, because what you're about to see is that the actual NPK numbers are not that much different. Can you see that, Tyler? Can you see both?
Yes.
Got that pretty good?
Bring the plant tone back over just a hair.
Right there?
Yep, a little bit more.
Right there?
Yes.
All right, we're good. So, what do we see here? 5% nitrogen in the plant tone. We got 4% in the Hollytone. Not much difference. 3%, 3%, 3%, 4%. So, what you're actually getting, just based on, like I said, with the Hollytone, it is a little bit different than some of the other products because it's got sulfur in it. And that's going to help lower pH. But as the NPK goes, there's not too much difference in their percentages. So try to avoid looking at these pretty labels and what all it says and just focus on the numbers, because that's actually what you're going to get. And like I was saying earlier, with the organic, since it is coming from a natural source, the percentages are much lower than what you're going to see. One of the products we sell here that's an organic is called bat guano, which is just bat poop, and it has the highest amount of nitrogen that you're going to find in an organic, and it's about 10% nitrogen on that bat guano, and that's about as high as you're going to get with an organic. Now, if you switching over, oh wait, I'm going to show you this. Okay, so yeah, Hollytone, plant tone, good products. Hollytone's good for lowering pH, especially for azaleas, blueberries, and obviously hollies. They take a little bit lower pH. This other organic product that we sell a lot of in the spring for tomatoes is Tomato Tone. Now, the biggest difference with Tomato Tone right here, you see our numbers, our NPKs. You see that, Tyler? You good?
Yep, looking
all right, we
good.
got a 3, 4, 6. So we have a lot of potassium at the end, keep things going, doing well. But what you also see, the very next chemical that is in it is calcium, and that's at 8%, which is fairly high. That's why it is a tomato tone product, because tomatoes need calcium, or what you see is blossom end rot, which is the dark, nasty black spot at the bottom end of your tomato. This will help out with that added calcium. So that's why it's called tomato tone. So, good one to use. Like I said, with this stuff, it's a granular. It smells real bad. Do know that. Don't bring it into your house and use it for your houseplants, because it stinks real bad. But all you do is just shake it on top of the dirt, work it in the first couple inches of the soil, and then water it, especially if you have like raised beds, things like that. If you just grow it in the ground, just a garden in the dirt, then just side dress, plant all your plants, let them grow for a week or two, and then go back and side dress down the rows, working it into the soil a little bit, preferably before a rain, or you just water it after you're done so it leaches down in there. So, cool. All right, those are the organics. Like I said, this garden food here is a synthetic. It's a 1010. That's the most basic fertilizer that people think of. You can use this. It's when you are using synthetics, make sure you read the product label and do not add too much of your fertilizer, because you can potentially burn your roots and affect your plant's health. So we want to avoid that. So this one here, directions, it's like 1 pound equals 1.5 cups. So you can, sprinkle, it'll tell you how much.
Hey, Austin, do you mind just throwing that up on the camera and,
Sure.
and seeing what that distribution looks like?
The 1010?
Yeah, well,
about-
just on the back where it tells you the measurements.
Yeah, so it's got good instructions. The directions are over here, general. Can you see that?
Yeah, just
For
lay
your
it a little
gardens,
bit
for your
flatter. There you go.
Huh?
That looks good.
Okay. Yeah, and it's, let's see, 1 pound for each 50 feet of row, with rows 30 inches wide. Always water thoroughly after feeding. So it's pretty easy. It's not a hard label to figure out.
And some of these have a table with how much you're supposed to add per plant, right?
Yeah. It'll tell you like individual plants as well, and also seeds if you want to. Generally, you're not going to fertilize like fresh seedlings very quickly. You want to let those get a little bit bigger, and then you can start your fertilizer program. This is another one that's kind of like a granular, so it's easy to just shake on top and then work into the soil. All right, garden food, 1010, like I said, real common. The next one I'm going to talk about, this one is Osmocote. We sell a lot of this. You can get a good picture of it there. This is for, it's marketed as a flower and vegetable. That's pretty broad. You can use this for really anything. A lot of times we don't use this in like a ground application, like when you like trees and shrubs, because the granular little beads they tend to want to wash away with soil. So we use this a lot for containers, which is really nice and really easy because this thing feeds for what the label says. It'll feed for up to 4 months, and that's pretty true. Here at the nursery, every bit of nursery stock that we get comes to us with an Osmocote type of granular fertilizer. You've probably seen the little beads on top of your plants when you buy them. They come in already with that. So almost every nurseryman is using this because it lasts so long and it feeds continuously but slowly. Now look at the numbers on this. This is a synthetic, so it's not organic. But look at the numbers. They start to jump up a little bit. It's right here on the side. It is a triple 14, so similar to a triple 10, except it's at 14% instead of 10. This is a good product. I love using this for most of my containerized plants because I can just pot it up, finish it, sprinkle these beads on top, water it in, and then I'm done with fertilizing pretty much for a good while. You want, while I'm here, when to fertilize is another thing we need to talk about, and it's mainly when plants are actively growing. So in the spring, whenever they first start to flush, you can give them their first dose of fertilizer, let them use that for a month or two, and then hit them again with another one. Unless you're using a product like this sticks in there for about 4 months, so you don't have to do that as often. But we want to fertilize whenever the plants are actively growing. Whenever they're going dormant, there is no point in fertilizing. We don't want them to do that. We don't want them to flush improperly. So during the growing season, whenever they're growing, a couple of different times. I'm going to talk about some specific things that we need to avoid in a little bit, but that's a general info.
Austin, we have a quick question here from Karen. Does Osmocote ever expire?
I think that it does. But I'll tell you, I've had a bottle for years now, and I still use it, and I see results with it. So I think everything technically does have a shelf life, and I'm not sure exactly what this one is, how many years it would actually be, but I've used mine through multiple seasons. Like I said, it's probably my third or fourth season on the same bottle because I bought a big old bottle, and I'm still using it, and it still seems to be working for me. So if it's just, a couple, 2 or 3 seasons old, just keep using it and use it up. But yeah, this is Osmocote's good because it is just so easy, and it continually feeds. All right, Osmocote. And then lastly, let's talk about Miracle Grow. All right, everyone's heard of this. This is a real boost. So I'm going to put both of these down so you can see. You got that, Tyler? You see that good?
Looking good.
All right, cool. So the one on the right here is just plant food, Azalea, Camellia, Rhododendron. Oh, I grabbed the wrong one. This is an acid plant one. I was trying to just get a general. Let me see what the numbers are in here. Okay, so the numbers here. Oh, and also I got a flower food right here. This is a bloom booster. What you notice with the bloom booster is what I was talking about earlier. The middle number that's responsible for your blooms and your roots. That's why they call this bloom booster. Look at these numbers. 10%, 52% phosphorus, and then 10% potassium. That is a boost. You know what I mean? That's what I'm saying. Like when you get down to 5.33 over here with your organics, and then you jump up to 10, 52, 10, that's a boost. That hits your plant quickly. Look at this one here. This one here is 30% nitrogen, which is a big jump, and then another 10% behind that. So this really boosts your plants quickly. I use this every single year. Trust me. I just don't use it in the ground. We mix this with water. It's tablespoon per gallon. People call it blue water. You've probably heard of that. And it's lost very quick. Okay, so liquid fertilizers are used very quickly. After you use them and apply them to your plants, you will see a very fast response. Within days, you can see either a yellow plant turn really green. You can see new growth flushing. These really hit a plant quickly, but at the same time, it's lost very quickly. It gets leached away through the soil very quickly whenever you water, and it gets washed away. That's why we generally don't really use this for in-ground applications as well. You can, and it will work, but it gets washed away quickly. So I always use these just for my containerized plants, which I think we're doing a webinar here in the spring on the mixed containers. I love doing mixed containers. One of my favorite things to put together. Cram it in there as full as I can get it and watch it through the season. I use this to keep those things lush through the whole season. So I'll just get a 5-gallon bucket. I'll get, a tablespoon per gallon, fill up my whole bucket, and just walk around my yard and just fertilizing about once a month during the growing season. to keep them just really either blooming heavily or leafing early in their stage. So with mixed containers, generally you're going to plant them, plant small plants into a larger container and then watch them grow. So at the beginning of the growing season, whenever you need those annuals or perennials to flush and fill out their container, we want to use a mix that's high with nitrogen, the first number. That promotes growth. Let's get those things poofed up and big. Let's get a happy, healthy green plant down below. We'll create a beautiful blooming plant up top. So we got to make sure those leaves are good and green. So you use the nitrogen first, heavy nitrogen, to get those plants, beefy. After that, we can switch over, especially if you're growing annuals for flowers, and rather than like foliage. If you're just growing foliage, then you can keep on with this fertilizer right here in your container and just grow beautiful leaves, because that's what the nitrogen is responsible for. If you're growing plants that want to have a ton of color, then let's switch over to this flower food after they've been growing for, say, about a month, and then you can start getting that phosphorus to those roots to expand that, and then also to expand your flower production.
So I'm looking up our webinar schedule. How to create springtime container gardens is February 24th, followed by March 2nd, container gardening across the seasons. And I think that was the one that you were getting at, right?
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, I was just trying to see. All right.
Also, you are doing both of those.
Oh, am I?
Yep, you are. Surprise.
All right. Plants that I guess, yeah, if you are growing, say, blueberries, or say your hydrangeas that you have are pink and you want them to be blue, then we need to lower pH. And how you do that is by getting one of these products that mention it for acid-loving plants. That's what they're going to be. Blueberries are one of them. Hollies, like I mentioned, camellias, rhododendron, azaleas. Azaleas will grow real pale yellow on you. They'll get veiny. So we need to have the pH lower, generally like 5.5, and even a little bit less you could do. So if your pH is high, and like I said, your hydrangeas are pink and you want them blue, let's get a product out here that mentions that it's acid loving, and it will drop that pH and get it back where you want it. Oh yeah, I was wanting to talk about tomatoes specifically. The thing about excess nitrogen, which is the first number, is that it's so good at what it does is that it only wants to promote green growth. And if you use nitrogen in excess with a number of things, but we're going to talk about tomatoes specifically because everyone loves to grow tomatoes, what you get by the end of the season is this big, beautiful, green, leafy, 14-foot tall, if you let it, tomato that has all these beautiful leaves on it and not a single fruit. Not that they decide, it's just that's what they do. If you have excess nitrogen, they're going to use it for leaves, and they're not going to produce blooms, and they're not going to produce fruit in any excess at all. I've seen huge, beautiful tomatoes with not a single fruit on them because nitrogen levels were way too high in the soil. So what I had mentioned earlier about the mixed containers when your plants are small, same thing with tomatoes. You set them out in the garden, they'll be about this big roughly, put them down in there, you plant them, and then after they get kind of seeded in the ground, you can give them a heavier dose of nitrogen right off the rip, and let them get a little bit beefier, like I was talking about. Once the weather starts to warm up in the spring and they're growing good and they look good, that's whenever the nitrogen is needed for the green growth. Once they get up to a certain size, say about waist high, and they look bushy and they look healthy, we need to stop that nitrogen because they do not need it anymore. They have plenty. We need to switch over to a more phosphorus scenario, so the higher middle number on that. Once you start pumping it with that, then you're going to start seeing a lot of flowers and a lot of fruit production. So don't overdo it with the nitrogen on fruiting plants. When it comes to annuals, it's a different story. You can use it, early in the season again. But for the most part, I haven't had much of an issue with my containerized plants, like my annuals flowering or whatever, because I just use a Miracle Grow that's like, what is it, 28? It's like 28, 18, 16 or something like that. It's another Miracle Grow product, just something I had left over from last year. But that's got a lot of nitrogen in it. It does, 28%. But it's also got a lot of phosphorus in it too. That middle number is at 18%. And I haven't noticed with my annuals, specifically in containers, to bloom any less than what they would, because it seems like that product has enough middle number as well as the first number to keep them actively growing through the season. Because do know everything in a container is, it's loved by you. It's not getting its nutrients from the earth. It's coming from you specifically. So you need to make sure you do that either by shaking in some Osmocote whenever you're done or liquid fertilizing them as the season goes on.
Now we got a question from Shannon.
Okay.
What about the nitrogen schedule for perennials? Sort of a newbie here.
Okay. Once again, it's all about timing. So with your perennials, it depends on what perennial it is too. To be honest with y'all, some things don't really, especially if they're in the ground and they've been growing, and say you got a patch of hostas or you got a patch of black-eyed Susans or echinacea, those things that are kind of that kind of live without any issues, sometimes don't, our dirt is pretty fertile here. So unless you're just seeing issues, which the number one issue you're going to see with plants that need food is going to be yellowing. That's the first sign of a nitrogen deficiency. So anything that starts to go pale yellow, just not green, not looking good, that needs some fertilizer. But perennials that have been in the ground and been there for a while really don't need too much more than what our soil can give it, because they're kind of natives around here. A lot of them are. So not the biggest thing unless you're seeing an issue. If your plants are coming back, your perennials are coming back every year and they look green and they're growing and they're flowering for you, then you may not need to waste your time with fertilizer. It's the earth is doing it for you. Now, like I said, if you do see issues, you see yellowing or you see them just not performing well or growing slow, then we can juice them up. And that's when early in the season, whenever we need to green them up and they're actively growing and using food, that's whenever we're giving them that fertilizer, specifically that nitrogen to, boost them a little bit. So good question. But it's really all about timing. Once we start getting late into the summer and we start going into the fall and things are kind of slowing down, they're not really growing much anymore, that's a general sign that we're not really going to fertilize much anymore. Now, when it comes to large trees, you could put some granular down like late summer, because a lot of times things do have a little bit of a fall flush, if you will. So it would be beneficial to get something down on like longer term, think trees and shrubs and perennials that need to come back every year. It's not a bad idea to go ahead and get some fertilizer drop down for them for that fall flush that they get. And then after that, we're just going to not fertilize through the whole winter, just let them go dormant, and then do it whenever it's time in the spring for them to flush. So we got any other questions? I feel like I've hit it pretty good. Like I said, it's really all about the numbers. It's not about the labels all that much. It can get you on the right track when you come out here and you have no clue what you're doing and looking at going to, say you growing tomatoes, grow straight to the tomato tone, because there's a reason why they put tomato tone on there. It's because of the calcium. But when you actually look at the numbers, not too much of a difference in percentages. So just know that.
I've got a question.
What up?
So, like bone meal and rock phosphate and things like that, would you recommend buying those bags if you had a larger garden area, and let's say I wanted more blooms or fruit on my tomatoes, and I had a garden plot that was like 10 foot by 20 foot. I would use one of those bags, right?
Yeah, and it depends. You can do for larger areas, you can do a total broadcast spread of these products as well. Say before you ever even plant, if you have a 10 by 10 area that you wanted to plant tomatoes in a garden, the whole thing, then work your soil and then add this stuff right on top of it at first. Work that in and then plant your plants. It makes it a little bit easier. It's not as cost effective because you're kind of spreading that all over the thing, so you can plant it first and then just side dress right next to them. But yeah, you would use those bags just like you would use any of these. And it's just look at the numbers and look at what it says and what you're trying to achieve with your specific plants. You're growing bulbs and things that put a lot of energy into their roots, then obviously we're going to look for those, the product labels will say something about bulb or root or whatever. You'll look at the numbers and it'll show you that middle number is much higher than the other two. So just like I was saying, just look at the numbers, don't, and figure and know when you come out here what you're using it for, what you're trying to produce.
Now, I covered this a little bit with winter garden prep, but how do you feel about really early application? Like you said, of the first thing you do before you plant is apply your fertilizer to prep the bed.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have to cover that at all to say keep it there to keep it from washing out?
It depends. If you have typically gardens are flat, so they don't get washed away all that bad. If you can incorporate it into the first couple inches of the soil, it's great. It'll greatly help you out. But yeah, most fertilizers, and especially Osmocote, I know for sure, it won't activate at a lower temperature than I think it's 60 degrees. Like, it has to be fairly warm for this to even start breaking down and working. So doing it early whenever its soil's still really cold may not be all that beneficial. As long as you can keep it there, it ain't going nowhere. It's going to sit there until it's warm enough to start breaking down. So you can do it. It's just not generally done. It's just not, the plants aren't going to use it right then. So I like to get mine going first. Get them up and a little bit I can tell they've latched into the soil, after you've planted them. And then I like to go in and just side dress. Makes it easier.
Let's talk about also adding fertilizer to the hole when planting.
I don't like doing that. I don't like the fertilizer right touching the roots. That makes me a little nervous. If I'm using organics, it's not that big of a deal. But not just directly down in the hole. Like, if you are going to use it whenever you put it down in your hole, take the dirt out like you would, get it planted, and then use your fertilizer and put it on top of that dirt and work it all in together. Incorporate the fertilizer with the soil so it's touching more soil, not just directly on the roots. If you use synthetics and you do that a little bit too much and they touch directly to the roots, you can see some burn on that, and you'll see the top part of the plant not looking as good. So incorporate it first and then put it down in there. And yeah, you got fertilizer right to that root zone. It's where you need it. So then after that, you water it thoroughly, and that it's getting to the roots.
What about side dressing? Is that kind of we have a question here. Would you recommend around the drip line?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So if y'all don't know what a drip line, it's where the water drips from the top of the plant. So say it's a large tree. Let's just go there.
Oh, she's saying what is side dressing. So let's back up and address all that.
Okay, yeah. So side dressing, to me, I come from the way of gardening for me is a big plot of ground. I just use the earth, and I don't have raised beds or anything. So side dressing is a common thing to do for farmers and people that do that. It is that you've got your row. Say, let's just do tomatoes because they're common. You've got a row of tomatoes. You're just going to go down either side of those tomatoes and create kind of a little, you can make a little ditch beside them if you want, or you can just sprinkle it on top, and you literally just sprinkle fertilizer down next to the plant. You don't have to get right up on that stem. That's what I was talking about earlier with the drip line. So a drip line is,
Gotcha.
So we'll just talk about a tree. You have a stem and you have your canopy. Where that water drips off that canopy, that's your drip line. So if the leaves are all out here, then the water's going to drip, around the edges, and you'll see this drip. You'll see water down below that mimics the up top canopy. So same thing with a tomato. You got a tomato that gets out, I don't know, out to here, if you will. So its drip line is going to be down. And the roots, the reason we say that is because the roots mimic the top of a canopy. You have a big canopied tree up here, you have the stem, and then you have a lower underground level of roots that mimics the canopy pretty closely. So if a spread of an oak tree is 50 feet wide, typically down below the roots are as well 50 feet wide to stay on that drip line if they can, because that's where the water's coming. So like I said, you don't have to get it right on the stem. We want it kind of at the edges where the drip line are, so the roots go out and get it. So that's really all side dressing is, just a fancy term for putting fertilizer down beside the plants instead of right on the main stem. So what else we got? Any more questions? Are we good?
And if anybody has more questions, go ahead and type them in the chat below. While we have a little bit of time, I'm just going to bring up our upcoming webinars. Let's see. So yeah, tomorrow, Austin, you're going to be doing some fruit tree pruning, the basics of fruit tree pruning.
We've got a peach tree we're pruning tomorrow.
Yep, we'll be taking a field trip for that one, so that'll be fun. And then all about succulents will be Friday. That's with Vanessa and Caroline. We're going to take a dive into that. Followed by native species next week with Joy Bovin on January 26th. Shrubs for Small Spaces, January 27th. Indoor fern care rounds out the end of January on the 29th. Let's see. Somebody chimed in. Any tips for indoor plants? Fertilizing?
You know, I thought about bringing it. There is some other products that are labeled for houseplants specifically. Once again, we're getting back to those numbers. It's what you want to achieve. The easiest way to go is to use Osmocote, shake it in around the top, water it in, let it just sit there for a few months, and it slowly fertilizes your plant to just keep. If you just want to keep your houseplants just kind of green and healthy and looking good without having to do much, just use Osmocote. It's the easiest way to just apply and use. If you have a problem with your plant and you're seeing yellowing, you're seeing, it just doesn't seem healthy, doesn't seem like it's growing, maybe let's step it up a little bit and go with one of these Miracle Grow products. Mix it with water, and then put it in your sink and water it thoroughly and see if we can't get a quick response out of that to quickly turn around an issue that you're having. But like I said, they do sell what they call indoor plant mixes, and one of them is pretty easy, actually. It's just called indoor plant food, and all you do with that is whenever you water, you put a few drips of that in literally every time you water your houseplants, and that'll keep that thing. I think it's just a 10/10 as well, though, but it's an easy way to apply it. You can just drip it into your little watering can or whatever you use, and that's like every time you water. So that keeps your plants' vigor up there, keeps them happy and green. But once again, it's about those numbers and what you're trying to achieve.
Something else, speaking of a liquid fertilizer, I have a bottled fish fertilizer.
Yeah.
And I've mixed that into my watering can and use it in my garden.
Yeah, most definitely.
It works pretty well.
Yeah.
It's stinky, though.
It is stinky, yeah. That's why you avoid that for indoor plants for the most part. But, yeah, fish emulsions are commonly used. We sell that out here. We've got kelp meal. Shoot, there's all sorts of ways to get what you need out of those numbers for plants. But yeah, there's literally tons.
Mm-hmm. And ultimately, if you have like a specific concern or need, we have people here to help.
Oh yeah,
that's the main thing. Like, there's still a lot of labels to look at, and if you're not a label reader, you just want what needs to be done.
Yes, should come out, show me a picture of your plant, what it looks like. I can tell you what it needs. There are some things that we can tell as horticulturists to know how to fix a problem based on the picture that you have. So one very common one y'all should all know and keep an eye out for is a plant that has very yellow vein, like green. You only see it's very veiny. Whenever you see this, you'll see I should have brought some in. It's a leaf that you can really see pronounced veins in it, and the rest of the plant the rest of the leaf is off colored, but the veins are still very prominent. That's an iron deficiency. That is specific to that, so you'll see it right on the veins. If you see that happening, come on out. We'll get you some iron because that's what that plant needs. Very common that happens in azaleas, but a number of plants can do that, even indoor plants as well. So if it has a lack of iron, it shows you that pretty well.
And what about, don't plants also yellow when they don't have enough water?
Oh, no, not really usually.
They more wilt?
They wilt. A watering, not enough water scenario is typically a wilt first, and then you'll start seeing senescence, which is just leaf drop, mainly from the interior first. You'll start seeing them go. They'll drop from the interior, and then they'll wither, and eventually the worst, is crunchy. You ever see crunchy? That's definitely a bad sign. Wilty's okay. Wilty means water me. I prefer to let my plants wilt a little bit before I water them, so I don't keep them on the wet side. Almost everybody keeps things on the wet side. Another reason you don't do that is when you keep things on the wet side, they don't have the ability to take up fertilizer in food. They're saturated. They're just sitting there. They're not producing new roots. So, like I said, wilty is okay. That just means water me. But when you start seeing leaf drop and you start seeing crunchy leaves, that's when you know you've let it go too far, and it'll just die. But that's actually pretty rare. It's way, way more common for people to keep their plants too wet than too dry. So let your stuff get dry a little bit in between and then water. And you'll have better success with fertilizers as well.
Excellent. Well, does that about cover everything?
I think we've covered it. It's not that hard. Just fertilize them when they're actively growing, and if you have problems, know which product to use, and that's where we come in to come help you. So pictures help us out a lot, and we're always here.